This is watercolor. It's Daniel Smith watercolor and a little Winsor & Newton if you're familiar with watercolor brands. You don't need to buy any fancy watercolor brands necessarily. I would, if I was beginning with watercolor, if you're interested, I would splurge on paper personally. Watercolor, yeah, I really think genuinely that Daniel Smith and Winsor & Newton are the best that I've used, but the paper is really the most important part. So and you don't have to like go crazy on the paper either. I'm not saying like buy, Arches 40-pound or whatever hot press paper. I'm just saying like if you gotta choose. So anyway, that was an unnecessary rant about supplies. Here is just a portrait of someone that I saw on Pinterest. Pinterest is what I use to find reference photos a lot of the time, especially for portraits. I don't have the money to hire a model, and these usually have really cool lighting. I have like a whole board on Pinterest that you can probably follow. Just adding the darkest darks, which really takes it up a notch. I would say that my number one tip for beginner artists is to just really establish those darkest darks. Like those dark, like blur your eyes when you're looking at the photo reference or, the real life reference, and just establish where the darkest moments are, the highest points of contrast between values, and really focus on those moments. That is my number one tip. Moving on to what I'm painting now in this video. It is a teapot. I bought a new teapot. Pretty exciting. I burned my other one to a crisp because it didn't have a whistle, which, first of all, I don't recommend buying a teapot that doesn't whistle. That's pretty imperative in in the qualities of a teapot. So I put it on the stovetop, turned on the stove, walked away, started talking to someone, and then, so moments later, I smelled burning, and luckily I didn't burn down my house, but I had to get a new teapot because all of the water had dried up and the bottom of the teapot was burnt to a crisp. So that's my story. This is a beautiful new teapot, though. I got it at Fred Meyer. I loved the color of it. It does whistle, fully functioning whistle. Then just establishing a little bit more of those darkest darks as the final step. And that's how I painted the teapot. I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I'm going to paint, or not paint, I'm moving on to ink. I like to use different media throughout the sketchbook pages. I think it makes it look more dynamic and it's more fun for me because I have a lack of focus in general in my life, and that transfers into my art. If I watercolor all week, I'm going to get sick of it and then I'm going to go into ink, you know what I mean? So I figured I might as well just lean into that in my sketchbooks because they're supposed to be a fun place to experiment. And so I've already done watercolor, did gouache on the teapots, and now I'm moving into ink. This is another image I found on Pinterest. It's just a little bunny. I was thinking about spring because it's officially spring 2020, and we really needed it. Man, this was a hard winter, and it still continues to be pretty difficult, actually. We are in the midst of the coronavirus crisis, and hopefully someday this will be like a moment I'll look back on and be like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was weird. I cannot wait for that day. But overall, for me, I am pretty lucky. I did temporarily lose my job because of it, but it has given me a lot more time to do stuff like this, like start my Patreon and just paint all day. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will have more to come. That was the last page of my sketchbook, so I'm going to have a sketchbook tour out soon. Once again, thank you so much for supporting me and being a patron, especially during this time. I really, really appreciate it. So yeah, see you next time.